Marie Curie, the woman who revolutionized science, Part 1. Europe before Marie Curie. In the final decades of the 19th century, Europe stood on the threshold of a scientific revolution that would fundamentally transform human understanding of matter and energy. The Industrial Revolution had already reshaped the continent's physical landscape, but now a quieter, more profound transformation was underway in the laboratories and universities, where physicists and chemists pursued knowledge that would unlock the invisible architecture of nature itself. The scientific community of the 1890s operated within a framework that seemed nearly complete. Classical physics, built on the foundations laid by Isaac Newton 2 centuries earlier, appeared to explain the mechanical universe with elegant precision. Chemistry had organized the elements into Dmitri Mendeleev's periodic table, suggesting an underlying order to all matter. Yet beneath this confidence, anomalies were accumulating that would soon shatter the certainty of classical science. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen discovered X-rays in his laboratory at the University of Würzburg, producing invisible radiation that could pass through solid matter and expose photographic plates. The discovery electrified the scientific world and prompted immediate investigation across Europe. The following year, Henri Becquerel in Paris discovered that uranium compounds spontaneously emitted similar penetrating rays without any external stimulus. This phenomenon, which would soon be called radioactivity, suggested that atoms themselves might not be the indivisible, unchanging units that scientists had long assumed. The scientific world that awaited Marie Curie was one of unprecedented opportunity, yet also one of rigid barriers. While men could pursue advanced degrees and academic positions throughout Europe's great universities, women faced systematic exclusion from higher education in most countries. In France, the Sorbonne had only begun admitting women students in 1868, and by the 1890s they remained a tiny minority in scientific fields. In the Austrian, Prussian, and Russian empires that had partitioned Poland among themselves in the late 18th century, educational restrictions on women were even more severe. The Polish territories under Russian control, where Maria Skłodowska would spend her formative years, denied women access to universities entirely. Yet it was precisely from this constrained environment that one of history's greatest scientists would emerge, drawn to Paris by the promise of education and the allure of scientific discovery that was beginning to reveal nature's most fundamental secrets. Sources used. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn, pages 47-63, The Oxford Companion to the History of Modern Science, edited by J. L. Heilbronn, pages 689-691, Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith, pages 2338 Part 2, Childhood, Education and Journey to Paris. Maria Salomia Skłodowska was born on November 7, 1867, in Warsaw, then part of the Russian Empire following Poland's partition. She entered a family where education was valued above almost everything else. Her father, W. Ladislaw Skłodowski, taught mathematics and physics at a gymnasium, while her mother, Bronislawa Boguska, had been a teacher before marriage and directed a prestigious girls' school. Maria was the youngest of 5 children in a household where intellectual conversation and academic achievement formed the fabric of daily life. The comfort of her early childhood proved fragile. The Russian authorities, suspicious of Polish nationalism, gradually stripped her father of his teaching positions and reduced the family to economic hardship. When Maria was 8 years old, her oldest sister Zofia died of typhus. 2 years later, her mother succumbed to tuberculosis after a long illness. These losses marked the child deeply, leaving her with what her daughter Eve would later describe as an enduring sadness that never entirely disappeared. Despite financial struggles, Maria excelled in her studies, graduating from gymnasium at 15 with a gold medal. But Russian-controlled Warsaw offered no university education for women. Young Polish women seeking higher education faced an impossible choice: remain in their homeland without access to advanced learning, or leave for Western Europe, where universities were beginning to admit women. Maria and her sister Bronislawa devised a pact. Maria would work as a governess to support Bronislawa's medical studies in Paris. When Bronislawa finished, she would help Maria do the same. For nearly 7 years, Maria worked in Polish households, teaching children and saving money. During this period, she participated in the Flying University, an underground educational network that moved between private homes to evade Russian authorities who prohibited higher education in Polish. These clandestine classes provided some intellectual sustenance, but they could not substitute for formal university training. In her private correspondence from this period, preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Maria expressed growing frustration with the limitations of her position and increasing determination to pursue scientific education. In November 1891, at age 24, Maria Skłodowska finally boarded a fourth-class train to Paris. She enrolled at the Sorbonne as one of only 23 women among more than 2,000 students in the Faculty of Sciences. Living in a small attic room in the Latin Quarter, often without adequate heat or food, she devoted herself completely to her studies. In 1893, she passed her license in physical sciences, ranking first in her class. The following year, she earned a second degree in mathematical sciences, placing second. It was during her search for laboratory space in early 1894 that a Polish colleague introduced her to Pierre Curie, the laboratory chief at the School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry. 8 years her senior, Pierre had already established a reputation for precise experimental work on crystallography and magnetism. Their conversation that spring afternoon revealed shared intellectual passions and similar dedication to scientific research. 14 months later, on July 26, 1895, they married in a simple civil ceremony. Rather than a traditional wedding gown, Maria wore a dark blue dress that would prove practical for laboratory work. The wedding gift they treasured most was a pair of bicycles, on which they would take long rides through the French countryside, discussing science and planning their future research. Sources used. Madame Curie. A biography by Eve Curie, pages 3896. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn, pages 78-114. Autobiographical Notes by Marie Curie, published in Pierre Curie by Marie Curie, pages 186-190. Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith, pages 3971. Part 3. Discovering radioactivity and winning the Nobel Prize in 1897, Marie Curie faced a decision that would determine her scientific legacy. Now the mother of a daughter, and settled into married life, she needed to choose a research topic for her doctoral thesis. Few women had attempted doctoral work in physics, and none had done so in France. She needed a subject that was both scientifically significant and practically achievable in the limited laboratory space available to her. Henry Becquerel's 1896 discovery of uranium rays provided the answer. While Becquerel had identified the phenomenon and conducted initial investigations, systematic study of these mysterious rays had barely begun. Marie Curie recognized an opportunity to make original contributions in an emerging field where established physicists had not yet claimed territory. In her laboratory notebook, she formulated her research question with characteristic precision: to measure exactly how much radiation different uranium compounds produced, and to determine whether any other elements exhibited similar properties. Working in a converted storeroom at the School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry, she used an electrometer that Pierre and his brother Jacques had invented years earlier to measure electrical charge in the air ionized by radiation. Her methodical approach began with pure uranium compounds, establishing baseline measurements. Then she tested every element and compound she could obtain, searching for others that might emit similar rays. In February 1898, she discovered that thorium produced radiation independently of Becquerel, a finding that the German physicist Gerhard Karl Schmidt had made simultaneously, but that Marie Curie reached through her own systematic investigation. More significantly, she noticed something that Becquerel had missed. Pitchblende, the ore from which uranium was extracted, emitted far more intense radiation than pure uranium itself. This made no sense if uranium alone caused the phenomenon. In her paper published in April 1898, she proposed a bold hypothesis. Pitchblende must contain traces of an unknown element far more radioactive than uranium. The word radioactive itself was her coinage, first appearing in this paper to describe elements that spontaneously emitted Becquerel rays. Pierre Curie recognized the significance of his wife's findings immediately. He abandoned his own research on crystals to join her investigation. Together, they began the exhausting work of chemically processing tons of pitchblende residue, donated by the Austrian government from mines in Bohemia, to isolate the mysterious new element. Their laboratory conditions were primitive even by 1890 standards. The converted shed they used had a leaky roof, no ventilation system, and inadequate heating. Visiting scientists were often shocked by the crude facilities in which such groundbreaking research was conducted. The chemical separation process required both intellectual rigor and physical endurance. Marie performed much of the heavy labor herself, stirring boiling solutions in large iron basins with heavy metal rods, then carrying precipitates between containers. Each step concentrated the radioactive component while separating out known elements. In July 1898, they announced the discovery of a new element they named polonium, after Marie's beloved Poland. 6 months later, in December 1898, they reported a second new element, radium, which proved far more intensely radioactive than polonium. Announcing the existence of new elements and proving their existence were different matters. To convince the skeptical chemistry community, the Curies needed to isolate enough pure radium to determine its atomic weight and position in the periodic table. This required processing literally tons of pitchblende residue through countless cycles of dissolution, precipitation, and crystallization. Marie Curie would later recall in her autobiographical notes that this period demanded physical labor, bordering on the limits of human endurance. By 1902, after 4 years of continuous work, she had processed more than 8 tons of pitchblende waste to produce 1/10 of a gram of pure radium chloride. Her doctoral thesis, defended on June 25, 1903, presented the first comprehensive study of radioactive substances. The examining committee, which included Henri Poincaré and Gabriel Lippmann, awarded her the doctorate with the highest distinction. The Sorbonne published her thesis, which immediately became a foundational text for the emerging field of radiochemistry. That same year brought recognition beyond the French scientific establishment. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announced that the 1903 Nobel Prize in Physics would be awarded to Henri Becquerel for discovering radioactivity, and to Pierre and Marie Curie for their research on radiation phenomena. Initially, the nomination had included only Henri Becquerel and Pierre Curie. Pierre insisted that Marie's contributions were at least equal to his own, and the committee revised the award accordingly. Marie Curie became the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize, though she and Pierre were too exhausted and ill from years of exposure to radioactive materials to travel to Stockholm for the ceremony. Their discoveries had transformed physics and chemistry. Radioactivity revealed that atoms were not eternal and indivisible but could spontaneously transform, releasing energy in the process. This finding would eventually lead Ernest Rutherford and Frederick Soddy to formulate the theory of atomic disintegration, and would pave the way for 20th-century nuclear physics. The Curie's work had opened a door to a realm of nature that 19th-century science had not imagined existed. Sources used. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn. Pages 133-198. Radioactive Substances by Marie Curie. Thesis, republished in Pierre Curie by Marie Curie. Pages 89–177. Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith. Pages 72–119. Pierre Curie by Marie Curie. Pages 72–85. 186–199. The Oxford Companion to the History of Modern Science, edited by J. L. Heilbronn. Pages 191–192. Part 4. Personal Tragedy and Greater Scientific Success. On April 19, 1906, a spring rain fell steadily over Paris. Pierre Curie, leaving a gathering of scientists at the Sorbonne, stepped into the Rue Dauphine behind a horse-drawn carriage. Distracted, perhaps by the scientific problems that constantly occupied his mind, he stepped directly into the path of a heavy wagon. The driver could not stop in time. Pierre Curie died instantly beneath the wagon's wheels, his skull crushed. Marie Curie's grief, according to her daughter Eve's later account based on Marie's private journal from this period, was both profound and private. She refused the pension offered by the French government, determined to support herself and her two daughters through her own work. The University of Paris offered her Pierre's professorship, making her the first woman to teach at the Sorbonne in its 650-year history. On November 5, 1906, she delivered her first lecture, beginning precisely where Pierre's last lecture had ended, a gesture widely noted by the press but which Marie herself in her writings presented simply as scientific continuity. She returned to her research with renewed intensity. The isolation of pure radium metal, which Pierre had not lived to see, became her immediate goal. Working with André Debierne, who had discovered the radioactive element actinium in 1899, she finally succeeded in preparing pure radium metal in 1910. This achievement, requiring sophisticated electrochemical techniques, demonstrated that radium was indeed a distinct element with properties that could be precisely measured and studied. In 1911, the Swedish Academy announced that Marie Curie would receive the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery of radium and polonium and the isolation of radium. She became the first person, and remains one of only 4 individuals, to receive Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. The recognition came at a moment of personal crisis. Weeks before the announcement, the French press had published details of her relationship with physicist Paul Langevin, a former student of Pierre's who was separated but not divorced from his wife. The scandal consumed Paris newspapers for months. Some members of the Swedish Academy suggested she should decline the prize or not attend the ceremony. Marie Curie's response, preserved in her correspondence with the Swedish physicist Svante Arrhenius, was uncompromising. She wrote that she had received the prize for her scientific work, and that work was distinct from my private life. She traveled to Stockholm in December 1911, delivered her Nobel lecture on radium and radioactive substances, and accepted the award. Her lecture, still studied by chemists and historians of science, provided a comprehensive review of radioactivity research and outlined the theoretical questions that remained unresolved. The personal attacks wounded her deeply, causing what her daughter Iron later described as a breakdown that required months of recovery. Yet professionally, she continued to command respect from serious scientists. Ernest Rutherford, Frederick Soddy, and other leading physicists of the era maintained their correspondence with her and recognized her scientific authority. The University of Paris, despite the scandal, continued her appointment and approved plans for a new research facility. What distinguished Marie Curie's work in this period was not only her technical achievements, but also her insistence on precision and standardization. She established the international standard for measuring radioactivity, defining the Curie as a unit equal to the radioactivity of 1 gram of radium. This standardization allowed researchers worldwide to compare their results and build on each other's work, exemplifying her commitment to collaborative scientific progress even as she faced personal isolation. Sources used. Madame Curie. A biography by Eve Curie. pages 208 and 287. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn, pages 229-301. Pierre Curie by Marie Curie, pages 167. Nobel Lectures in Chemistry, 1901-1921. Marie Curie's lecture delivered December 11, 1911, pages 202-212. Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith, pages 158-197. Part 5. World War I and Humanitarian Work. When Germany invaded Belgium and France in August 1914, Marie Curie immediately recognized how her scientific knowledge could serve the war effort. Soldiers wounded at the front faced a terrible disadvantage. Field hospitals lacked X-ray equipment to locate bullets and shrapnel embedded in their bodies. Surgeons operated blind, often causing additional damage while searching for foreign objects. X-ray technology existed, but the bulky equipment remained in urban hospitals far from the battlefields. Marie Curie conceived a practical solution. She would create mobile X-ray units that could travel directly to field hospitals and casualty clearing stations near the front lines. Using her influence and the authority of the Radium Institute, which the University of Paris and the Pasteur Institute had established in 1914 just before the war, she obtained vehicles, requisitioned X-ray equipment from laboratories and wealthy donors, and designed installations that could function in makeshift medical facilities with unreliable electrical supply. By late 1914, she had deployed the first vehicle, equipped with X-ray apparatus and a dynamo powered by the car's engine. These units, which soldiers quickly nicknamed Petites Curies or Little Curies, brought radiological imaging directly to wounded men. Marie Curie herself drove to field hospitals, often within range of artillery fire, to operate the equipment and train medical personnel. Her daughter Iron, only 17 when the war began, joined her mother's work, becoming an expert X-ray operator and eventually running several installations independently. The scale of the effort was remarkable. By war's end, Marie Curie had established 20 mobile radiological units and 200 permanent radiological installations at field hospitals. She trained 150 women as X-ray operators and radiological assistants, creating a corps of female medical technicians who served throughout the war. Contemporary medical reports, preserved in the archives of the French Military Health Service, estimate that over 1 million wounded soldiers received X-ray examinations through the Curie Radiological Service during the 4 years of war. Marie Curie's wartime work demonstrated scientific knowledge applied to urgent humanitarian need. She wrote detailed manuals on radiological technique for medical personnel with no physics background, explaining in clear language how to position patients, adjust exposure times, and interpret the resulting images. These manuals, published in 1916 and distributed to French military hospitals, represented some of the first systematic training materials for medical radiology. The physical toll of this work, combined with her decades of exposure to radioactive materials, began to show clearly. Photographs from the war years show a woman aged beyond her years, her hands scarred and damaged from handling radioactive substances and X-ray equipment without protection. Doctors of the era did not yet fully understand the dangers of radiation exposure. Marie Curie herself, in her scientific writings from this period, noted effects like burns and fatigue, but did not connect them to long-term health consequences. When the armistice came in November 1918, Marie Curie had spent 4 years in almost continuous service to the war effort. The French government recognized her contribution by awarding her the Reconnaissance Medal. More meaningful to her was the knowledge that her scientific expertise had directly alleviated human suffering on an enormous scale. She had demonstrated that science could serve not only the pursuit of knowledge, but also the most pressing humanitarian needs. Sources used. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn, pages 302-327. Madame Curie. A Biography by Eve Curie, pages 288-316. Marie Curie and Her Daughters by Shelley Emling, pages Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith, pages 198-216. Part 6. Final Years and Lasting Scientific Influence with Peace Restored. Marie Curie returned to the laboratory and to her role as director of the Radium Institute, which had stood largely unused during the war years. The institute, purpose-built for radioactivity research and located on Rue Pierre Curie in Paris, now became the center of an expanding scientific program. Under her leadership, it attracted researchers from across Europe and beyond, becoming one of the world's leading centers for nuclear physics and chemistry. Marie Curie's approach to directing the institute reflected her understanding that scientific progress required training new generations of researchers. She personally supervised doctoral students, reviewing their experimental techniques and discussing their results in weekly laboratory meetings. Among these students and collaborators were many who would make significant contributions to nuclear physics, including Salomon Rosenblum, who discovered the fine structure of alpha particle emissions, and her own daughter Iron, who continued radioactivity research with her husband Frédéric Joliot. The 1920s brought growing international recognition. In 1921, American journalist Marie Meloni organized a fundraising campaign that collected sufficient money to purchase 1 gram of radium for the Radium Institute, an amount worth over $100,000 at the time. Marie Curie traveled to the United States to receive this gift from President Warren Harding in a ceremony at the White House. The tour included visits to universities, hospitals, and women's colleges, where she spoke about science and encouraged women to pursue scientific careers. Her scientific work during this final period focused on chemistry and the medical applications of radioactivity. She published a comprehensive treatise on radioactivity in 1935, shortly after her death, summarizing 3 decades of research and developments in the field. She also supervised research on using radon and radium in cancer treatment, work that laid foundations for radiation therapy. The Radium Institute established a medical section that treated thousands of cancer patients, pioneering techniques that would evolve into modern radiotherapy. Yet the years of radiation exposure were exacting their price. By the early 1930s, Marie Curie suffered from cataracts, chronic fatigue, and deteriorating health. Doctors diagnosed aplastic anemia, a condition where bone marrow fails to produce sufficient blood cells. Modern medical understanding recognizes this as a consequence of prolonged radiation exposure, but physicians of her era did not make this connection definitively. She continued working as long as her strength permitted, reviewing research papers and advising students even as her health declined. In May 1934, she made her last visit to the laboratory. By June, her condition had worsened severely. She was taken to the Saint-Lémas Sanatorium in the French Alps, where doctors attempted treatments that proved futile. On July 4, 1934, at age 66, Marie Curie died. The official death certificate listed aplastic pernicious anemia as the cause. She was buried next to Pierre Curie at Sceaux Cemetery in a private ceremony attended by family and close scientific colleagues. Her scientific legacy continued immediately through her students, and especially through her daughter Iron and son-in-law Frédéric Joliot Curie. In 1935, just 1 year after Marie's death, Iron and Frédéric received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their discovery of artificial radioactivity, demonstrating that the research program Marie had begun 4 decades earlier remained at the forefront of nuclear science. The Radium Institute, later renamed the Curie Institute, continues its work in cancer research and treatment to this day. Sources used. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn, pages 328-428. Madame Curie. A Biography by Eve Curie, pages 317-388. Marie Curie and Her Daughters by Shelley Emling, pages 125-178, Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith, pages 217-230, 8. The Oxford Companion to the History of Modern Science, edited by J. L. Heilbronn, pages 192-193, Part 7. Legacy and Historical Importance. Marie Curie's significance in the history of science extends far beyond the fact that she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, or the only person to win Nobel Prizes in two different sciences. Though these achievements remain historically remarkable, her fundamental contribution was opening a new domain of physics and chemistry that revealed nature at its most basic level of organization. Radioactivity, the phenomenon she named and systematically investigated, became the key to understanding atomic structure and nuclear forces. The scientific revolution she helped initiate transformed physics in the first decades of the 20th century. Ernest Rutherford used radioactive decay to probe atomic structure, leading to his nuclear model of the atom. Frederick Soddy and others developed the theory of isotopes based on radioactive transformation. Niels Bohr incorporated radioactivity into quantum mechanical models of atomic structure. Marie Curie's meticulous measurements and chemical isolation of radioactive elements provided the empirical foundation on which these theoretical advances were built. In medicine, her work led directly to radiation therapy for cancer treatment. The Curie Institute in Paris and its counterpart in Warsaw, both named in her honor, have treated hundreds of thousands of cancer patients using techniques that evolved from her early research on radium's biological effects. Modern radiation oncology, while far more sophisticated than the radium treatments of the 1920s, traces its lineage directly to the work she pioneered. The international system of radiation measurement still uses the Curie, though now often converted to the SI unit of the becquerel, as a tribute to her standardization efforts. Her influence on women in science, while often overstated in popular accounts, was nevertheless real and significant. She demonstrated through her example that women could conduct original research at the highest level. The fact that she achieved this recognition while raising two daughters and managing both professional responsibilities and household duties without the institutional support available to male colleagues made her accomplishment visible to subsequent generations of women scientists. Marie Curie herself, however, according to her own writings and correspondence preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, insisted that scientific work should be judged on its merits regardless of the researcher's gender, and she resisted being categorized primarily as a woman scientist, rather than simply as a scientist. Historical assessment of Marie Curie has evolved as scholars have gained access to more complete documentation. Early biographies, particularly her daughter Eve's 1937 account, presented a somewhat idealized portrait that emphasized personal sacrifice and devotion to pure science. More recent scholarship, particularly Susan Quinn's thoroughly researched 1995 biography and Barbara Goldsmith's 2005 work, has revealed a more complex figure, ambitious as well as dedicated, capable of strategic maneuvering within institutional politics, sometimes difficult as a collaborator, and driven by personal motivations beyond pure love of knowledge. The question of how to appropriately credit the collaborative work she conducted with Pierre Curie has generated ongoing historical discussion. Contemporary accounts and their own correspondence make clear that their research partnership was genuinely collaborative, though Marie took the lead on the chemistry of radium isolation, while Pierre focused more on the physics of radiation. Pierre Curie himself, in letters to colleagues, emphasized that Marie's contributions were at least equal to his own. The 1911 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, awarded to Marie alone, was specifically for work that was primarily hers, distinguishing her independent contributions from their joint research. In 1995, France transferred the remains of Marie and Pierre Curie to the Pantheon, France's national mausoleum, for its greatest citizens. Marie Curie became the first woman honored in the Pantheon on the basis of her own achievements rather than those of her husband. The ceremony, attended by French President François Mitterrand, recognized not only her scientific discoveries, but also her service during World War I and her role in establishing French preeminence in nuclear physics. The Curie legacy continues through institutions that bear her name. The Curie Institute in Paris remains a leading cancer research and treatment center. The Maria Curie Museum in Warsaw preserves her birthplace and documents her Polish heritage. The European Union's Marie Curie actions fund researcher training and mobility, supporting thousands of scientists annually. Universities worldwide have named buildings, scholarships, and research centers in her honor. Yet perhaps her most enduring legacy lies in the scientific questions her work opened rather than those it answered. The discovery of radioactivity revealed that atoms could transform spontaneously, releasing energy according to principles that classical physics could not explain. This finding helped drive the development of quantum mechanics and nuclear physics. The medical applications of radiation continue to evolve as researchers develop more targeted cancer therapies. The fundamental questions about nuclear forces and elemental transformation that her work first posed continue to occupy researchers at facilities like CERN and national laboratories worldwide. Marie Curie's life embodied both the promise and the cost of scientific discovery. She achieved recognition and contributed knowledge that continues to benefit humanity decades after her death. She also paid with her health, her privacy, and years of struggle against institutional barriers that her male colleagues never faced. Understanding her legacy requires acknowledging both dimensions: the extraordinary scientific achievements and the personal price demanded for those achievements in a world not yet prepared to accept women as intellectual equals. Her story remains relevant not because it offers simple lessons or easy inspiration, but because it honestly represents the complex reality of pursuing scientific truth in an imperfect human world. Sources used. Marie Curie. A Life by Susan Quinn. Pages 429-471. Madame Curie. A Biography by Eve Curie. Pages 389-396. Obsessive Genius. The Inner World of Marie Curie by Barbara Goldsmith. Pages 239-259. The Oxford Companion to the History of Modern Science, edited by J. L. Heilbronn. Pages 192-193. 689-691. The Cambridge History of Science, Volume 5. The Modern Physical and Mathematical Sciences, edited by Mary Jo Nye. Pages 102-105. Marie Curie and Her Daughters by Shelley Emmeling. Pages 179-196. Radioactive. Marie and Pierre Curie. A Tale of Love and Fallout by Lauren Redness. Pages 97-109.